Are you suffering from a painful problem and you're looking to get better as quickly as possible? If you are, then you must realise that sleep is one of the crucial aspects of your recovery. Today's video is going to reveal the 9 sleep mistakes that many people make that slow down their healing and cause them to get better a lot slower than they should. My name is Harlow and I'm the Over-Fifties Specialist Physio here at HT Physio in Farnham. And today I'm going to reveal what those 9 sleep mistakes are and how to avoid them. Now, sleep is a completely crucial aspect of recovery. It's one of the most important factors we look for when we have someone with an injury, whether that's a shoulder problem or a neck problem or a back problem. If they're not sleeping well, then they tend to get better much slower. Now, I completely understand that there sometimes is a cruel irony in this. These painful problems can keep people awake, which means they can't sleep as well as they should, which means that they get better slower, which means that they stay awake for longer, and the circle goes on and on and on. So you'd probably be surprised at how often I, as a physio, have to talk to people about sleep. Now, through my time working as a physio, I've picked up on 9 major mistakes that many people make that slow down their recovery simply because they're not doing the right things to maximize their sleep. So let's talk about what these are each in turn and then talk about how to avoid them. So the first sleep mistake that many people make is to consume caffeine after midday. Now, you might be one of those people who says, it's fine, I can drink coffee right up until bedtime and I can still sleep, so I don't need to worry about this. And to be honest, I thought I was one of those people too. I could quite happily have a coffee at 5 p.m. and then still fall asleep at 10 p.m. later that night. But the problem comes not in whether or not you can fall asleep, but in the quality of the sleep you get. If we consume caffeine later on in the day, what that does is it stops us from getting something called slow wave deep sleep. Now, deep sleep is one of the 3 major categories of sleep which causes you to get better quicker. Deep sleep is when healing occurs in the cells in the body. It's also when growth occurs. So if you're trying to build muscle, deep sleep is super important. And it's also one of the phases of sleep where the brain is restored as well. Now, caffeine keeps us in light sleep. So light sleep is still important, but we don't get the same healing benefits of deep sleep if we're in light sleep all night. So because caffeine has something called a very long half-life, which means that it stays in your body a lot longer than even you feel the effect, if you have a coffee at 3 p.m, 4 p.m, it's still going to be very active by the time you go to bed at 10 or 11 p.m. Now, if you must drink coffee, like me, because I love coffee in the morning, I try and now keep coffee before midday. So I limit my caffeine intake after midday. One thing that's worked for me is to have my coffee in the morning, and then if I feel like I'm having a late morning or early afternoon lull, then I will have a green tea, which still has a little bit of caffeine in it, but nowhere near as much as a coffee. After 2 p.m, I have no caffeine whatsoever. And I'm trying to cut out even things like chocolate and sodas. So if I went out to meet friends in the evening, I wouldn't have Coca-Cola or lemonade, just because of the fact that it might have either sugar or caffeine in that keeps me out of deep sleep. So that's the first sleep mistake. It's one of the most obvious ones, but it's one that many people forget. Now, the second sleep mistake that can wreck people's sleep is eating too close to bedtime. Now, eating too close to bedtime, again, for many people is fine in terms of falling asleep. So they don't have any problems having a big meal, then lying down and falling asleep quickly. But again, similar to the first point, the problem comes in the quality of your sleep. When you eat, it raises your body temperature, which means that we avoid a stage of sleep called deep sleep, again, which means that we don't recover as much as we should. You might still get 8 hours sleep, but the quality of the sleep is no good. So try and eat at least 2 or 3 hours before you go to bed, and try to eat a smaller meal than you do earlier in the day, because the bigger the meal, the longer it takes to digest, and that effect only gets worse when you lie down because digestion doesn't happen as effectively. So eat way before bedtime rather than very close to bed to avoid that sleep mistake. Now, the third sleep mistake that many people make is they have too much stress before bedtime. Now, stress can be categorized as anything that raises up the arousal level of the body. And we think of stress as, emotional stress. So if you had an argument with your spouse, for example, we all know that that limits sleep. However, there are other forms of stress to consider as well. Physical stress is one of them. If you're one of those people who likes to have workouts late at night time, that's a type of stress. So you're going to stress the body just before bed, which raises the body temperature, and that also prevents you from falling into the essential stage of deep sleep later on in night. If you have a workout just before bed and you wear one of these sleep trackers, you will notice that your deep sleep often has to come later on in the night, which means you miss out on the early phases of deep sleep. So it's preferable for people, if they're going to do a really high stress, high energy workout, to do it earlier on in the day to give the body a chance to settle down and recover. And it also goes without saying, if you have a big conversation to have with your other half, try and do it earlier on in the day, not just before bed. Now, the fourth sleep mistake that people make is one that's more relevant to problems in the lower limb. And this is something that's non-obvious and a mistake that a lot of people make. Now, you'll see from many of my previous videos that I'm a big proponent of stretching the calves, because tight calves can lead to a whole range of problems in your ankles, in your feet, in your knees, even in your hips and lower back. Now, one problem that people often have at night time is they are putting their calves by accident into a shortened position for a full 8 hours. And that means that no matter how much stretching they do in the day, at night time they're undoing all of their hard work. So the mistake is tucking your sheets in too tightly. And this is especially a problem if you're a back sleeper. So if you're someone who sleeps on your back and your legs are flat, you have your feet like this, if you tuck your sheets in, that's going to push your feet forward into what we call a plantar flexed position, which shortens the calf at the back of the leg. And if you stay there for 8 hours, you're going to be in real trouble the next day with tight calves. Now, many people are doing this inadvertently, and it can be one of the causes for problems like plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendonitis, knee pain, meniscus injuries, things like that not getting better because the calves are remaining tight because they get tightened up every single night. So don't tuck your sheets in at the end of the bed, leave them loose. That means your feet can pop back up, which means the calves won't be as tight as if you have them tucked in and the calves in a shortened position. Now, the fifth sleep mistake that many people make is going to bed too late. Now, you might think, well, if I'm getting 8 hours of sleep, surely it doesn't matter if those 8 hours are between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. or 2 o'clock in the morning and 10 o'clock in the morning. Surely that's the same. And you're still going to be getting 8 hours sleep, granted, but the architecture of that sleep, as sleep scientist Matt Walker calls it, is going to be completely different. Now, research shows that in the early stages of the night, we get the most deep sleep. And in the late stages of the night, so early stages of the morning, we get the most REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep. Now, rapid eye movement is very important because it's when the brain restores. But deep sleep is when our injuries heal more effectively. So if you're not going to bed till 1 or 2 in the morning, you're missing out on 60, 70, 80% of the deep sleep you would have had if you went to bed earlier, when the early sleep cycles happen. So it's key here to go to bed early, ideally 9, 10, 11 o'clock, to capitalise on that deep sleep, which tends to occur between the hours of 11 p.m. and 2 o'clock in the morning. And then later on in the night, you'll get some REM, wake up early and start your day then. That tends to be the best pattern for most people. Obviously, everyone is different, but if you're going to bed very, very late, please be aware that you're going to be missing out on some vital deep sleep that perhaps you can't afford to. Now, the sixth sleep mistake that many people make is prone sleeping. Now, prone sleeping simply means lying on your front. And as a physio, we hate this sleep position for people because it leads to all kinds of different problems. When you lie on your front, what's happening, starting from head to toe, is first of all, your neck has to turn to allow yourself to breathe. So already you've got your neck in an extreme position for 8 hours at night, not ideal. The second thing that happens is one of your arms is going to have to come up. So you have your shoulder in an externally rotated position to rest it on the bed. The other one often goes the other way. So you've got this one in full internal rotation like this. Again, not ideal because we're stressing the joint to its end range for a long period of time. We also find that the lumbar spine, the back, has to come into extension, which for many people is very uncomfortable, particularly if you have some degree of arthritis in the lower back. Being in extension for a long period of time is going to make your back pain worse. Now, the only people who might benefit from prone sleeping are people with disc problems who like to be in extension for a while, but there are better ways to rehabilitate a disc problem. For most other people, being in lumbar extension for many hours is a bad idea. You also have to have one leg right up, so your hip is in a flexed position. We spend much of our day in hip flexion positions anyway, which is not beneficial. So all in all, front sleeping is a bad idea. If you are a prone sleeper, I would recommend you experiment with some other positions. It's going to be difficult at first to learn a new sleep position, but it could be beneficial to your healing. Now, the 7th sleep mistake that many people make is side sleeping. Now, side sleeping is not necessarily bad, so I'm being a bit exaggerative here. But for many people, sleeping on their side is going to make problems a little bit worse because it tightens up certain muscles. Now, if you have lower back pain, or if you have a hip problem, hip arthritis, or a labrum tear, or anything to do with this kind of region here, when we're lying on our side, what we're doing is we're bringing our knees up towards us to support us. And that puts us into something called a hip flexion position. Now, if you're like me and you spend much of your time sitting, you're spending almost all day in a hip flexion position as well, because sitting is the same as lying on your side, bringing your knees up towards you. Now, what happens is we have a very important set of muscles in the hip called the hip flexors. And if we're in a hip flexion position, very slowly over time, they are shortening and shortening and shortening. Now, when we go to stand up, which is a hip extension position, they're going to be tight. And that can pull on places like the hips, the lower back, and it can cause mechanical lower back pain. It can cause existing problems in the back to be worse. It can cause problems at the front of the hip, so tightness here. It can cause problems when walking. And tight hip flexors are generally just quite miserable for anyone who suffers them. So if that's you and you are a side sleeper, you're making the problem worse. You're putting yourself into a hip flex position for 8 hours, which for many people is not a good idea. And we don't nearly do enough stretching to counteract that. For those people, you might find that if you can sleep on your back, you have a much better outcome than if you can sleep on your side. So not everyone needs to pay attention to this. If you're someone who's very active and you don't have tight hip flexors, then you should be absolutely fine. But if you're someone who suffers from tight hip flexors, you're trying to stretch them and then you're going to sleep on your side, you're just undoing all your hard work. So have a look at your sleep position, take an honest appraisal of your body and what your injury is, and see if side sleeping is really the best option for you or not. Now, the 8th sleep mistake is choosing the wrong mattress. Now, most of us know that we should change our mattresses every 8 to 10 years, but did you know there's a handy way to choose the right mattress that goes beyond just choosing what feels comfortable for you? Now, this is especially relevant for people who are suffering with back problems or neck problems, because having the right mattress can really help to resolve those kinds of mechanical issues. Now, what we usually find is that for people who have something called a flexion preference, which means they prefer to bend forward than they do lean back. So if you bend forward and it feels good, and you bend back and it feels bad, then you might be better off on a softer mattress. This is because a softer mattress puts you more into a flexion position when you sleep on your back or your side than a hard mattress does. And that means that you'll be more comfortable because you'll be in your preferred position. Obviously, it's still important to try and extend in the day, but at night time, you want to be comfortable. So if that's you, a soft mattress might be better. Now, conversely, if you're like 80% of people and you find bending forward is stiffer than leaning back, then you might be better off on a hard mattress. And that's for the completely opposite reason. It's that the hard mattress doesn't put you into much flexion. It keeps you nice and straight, which keeps your spine into a more extended position, which for you would probably be better. So that's the golden rule for mattress selection. I often share that with my patients, but it really comes down to what you feel comfortable on. And the key is to go and test a few mattresses, lie down on them, and then preferably buy a mattress that has a 100 nights guarantee, so you can sleep on it for 3 months, and if you don't like it, you can return it. Now, the final sleep mistake that many people make that stops them from getting better is having the right sleep environment. Sleep environment is super important, and sleep environment basically means the level of light we have in our room, the level of sound we have in our room, and everything else that's going on around us when we sleep, including temperature. So in terms of light, the optimum way to sleep is to have a bat cave. Have absolutely no light whatsoever. So if you can get blackout blinds, blackout curtains, switch off all of the tiny little LED lights in your room. You don't want one of those bright alarm clocks. You don't want anything that flashes. You don't want a flashing light in your smoke detector, because even the smallest amount of light has potential to interfere with sleep. So the room should be as dark as you can handle it. In terms of sound, you can either opt for the quieter room being better, which is obviously the ideal. But if you live in a city and you have no choice but to have sound around you, you can either choose some earplugs which fit in your ears, or you can pipe in some white noise into your room. Now, white noise or pink noise, which is another type of noise that you can play through a speaker, has been shown to increase deep sleep and to improve the length of time you spend within deep sleep each night. So if you have a lot of noise going on around you, or you're someone that struggles to sleep, playing some quiet white noise might help. It will drown out the cars and the horns and the sirens outside, and it will also help you tap into some of the deep wave, slow wave deep sleep that helps with injury recovery. Now, for the last point, temperature. Temperature should be cool in your room, verging on cold almost. Most people sleep best somewhere between 16 and 20 degrees in the room. I like to go right on the cold side of that, which is why summer can be a problem for many people sleeping, because heat takes you out of restfulness states. It brings you up into alertness. Heat is often what wakes us up in the morning. So the body, if it feels hot, it says, oh, it's time to get up, which is a really bad thing to happen at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning. So keep your room cold, have a fan, have something called a chili pad, which is a pad that you can put underneath you with cooling technology. You can have cold flannels. You can make sure you're cool before you go to bed. But overall, keeping the room cool is key to getting and staying in the right amount of deep sleep. Anyway, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this video has been useful. Just to recap what we have for the top 9 sleep mistakes. We have caffeine after midday. We have eating too close to bedtime. We have stress before bed, including exercise. We have tight sheets, which are causing the calves to become shorter. We have going to bed too late. We have prone sleeping. We have side sleeping for many people. We have choosing the wrong mattress, and we have having the wrong environment. So that's it for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments below. And if you want more from me, you can pick up a copy of my book. It's called Thriving Beyond 50, and it will give you loads more tips, tricks, and strategies just like this video. You can use it, you can find it using the link below this video. So thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to speaking to you on the next one.